our Zoom group that we do on now we're doing it on Wednesday nights because that's the night that nobody has children that are in sports and that interference. And so we started a series called Goliath Will Fall, where we're diving into spiritual warfare with our young adults group. And I told Zach and I were talking about, okay, what do we want to talk about for the next 3 weeks in April? And I said, I'm just really stuck in spiritual warfare. It's like, Dale and Tina just spent a few weeks teaching about spiritual warfare. It's like, here we are doing it for young adults, talking about, the different Goliaths we face in our life. And Zach's like, well, why don't we, continue? So our new series for the next 3 weeks is called Under Attack. And we're going to talk about the top 3 spiritual warfare battles that we face. Because if we don't learn to recognize what we're facing when those giants come, then how can we know that, yes, that's a giant that I can defeat? So we're going to be talking about fear this morning. Fear is probably one of the biggest spiritual attacks that people deal with. So much so, we all know this, that there's 365 verses in the Bible that say, fear not. Think about that. How many days are in a year? 365. So if you wanted to make a list of every verse that says fear not, you would have one for every day of the year. So what does that tell you? That fear is a huge stronghold in our life that we can face and we come up against. And it doesn't always look like, hey, I'm afraid of something. Sometimes it looks like anxiety. I am somebody that has battled anxiety. I have had children, or I have children currently that are in the middle of battling anxiety. For those of that know, we've been very open about some of the spiritual thing, or some of the physical and spiritual things that we have faced with our children. And when Natalie is one that when she gets anxious and she's fighting that, she'll either pass out or have a seizure. That's how she physically is dealing with the spiritual battle of anxiety. So fear, anxiety, doubt has no age determination. My daughter is 10 years old. 10. So it doesn't matter if you're 3 years old or 103 years old. Fear is something that we all will battle at some point in time in our life. So if you're battling it, you got this. You can win. You can defeat it. But don't ever be ashamed of saying, I'm battling whatever you're battling. I'm going to say that again. Don't ever be ashamed to say, I'm battling whatever it is. Because when you keep it a secret, you're giving the devil a further foothold in your life. Amen? All right, so our verse this morning is 1 Peter 5:8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion. He does. He goes around roaring. But here's what I want to follow it up with. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. So fear is not just emotional. Fear is spiritual. We can treat fear like a personality, like it's a trauma response, like it's a life pressure. But Paul did not say that fear is just a feeling. He said it is a spirit. The spirit. This means it has influence. Spirits have intention. And spirits have an assignment in our life. And here's some of fear's assignments in our life. Fear lies about you. Fear paralyzes your obedience. Fear can disconnect us from God's presence. And fear will ultimately lead us to abort our purpose. It's not random. Fear is a targeted warfare. So the enemy, when you're going into war, Do you think that the enemy that you're fighting is just going to sit back and say, let me see if this works? Let me see if I can do this and see if it'll work. No. That enemy is going to study you. It's going to sit and watch you. The enemy studies your calling. The enemy studies your potential. And the enemy will figure out how he can distort your future impact. He wants to get you completely sidetracked. And he will send fear to the exact place you're supposed to walk in authority. Think about that. The enemy is going to send fear to the exact place that you're supposed to walk in authority over. You know, I grew up in some dysfunction. So when it came to parenting, I had some fears. And I have struggled in some areas when it came to parenting, but when I wrote that down in my notes, I was like, you know what? The fear of making the same mistakes my parents have made, I can see how that has impacted my life and how I've parented my own children. Because I'm a parent. I'm supposed to walk in authority in that area. And that means fear shows up where your purpose is supposed to live. So here's number 1. Write this down. Fear distorts your perception of reality. I'm going to say that again. Fear distorts your perception of reality. Numbers 13, talking about the Israelites. They were supposed to go into Canaan and vet it out, right? There were spies going in to see what the land looked like. And majority of them came back. And they were bound in fear. And they didn't lie, but their fear filtered the truth that came out of their mouth. We saw giants. Yeah, they did see giants. But that wasn't the whole story. They also saw fruit so large that it had to be carried on poles. They saw a land flowing with abundance, but they focused on the giants. So their fear distorted the perception of their reality. So fear edits what you see. Fear doesn't just show you one thing. Fear is trying to edit God out of the picture. How many times have we allowed that to happen in our own life? You see something in front of you, and you see the big instead of the small where God can move. They said we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. So fear is always going to start with identity distortion. The enemy doesn't need to change your situation. He needs to change how you see yourself. If he can change how you see yourself, then he's going to change how you see God. He's going to change how you see God. And so then instead of you seeing God as this supernatural Father that's got everything on your behalf all figured out, you're going to start to say, maybe I've got to grasp for control. Maybe I've got to figure out how to make this work instead of resting back and saying, God, you got this. You got it under control. Because your perception determines your participation. So if you've got a distorted perception, then you're not going to participate and do your part of what God's calling you to do. You know, there's this little video that Zach and I both saw at different times of this artist. And it was at this art gallery. And when you looked straight on at the picture, you saw this beautiful parrot. Or there was other animals that this artist did the same thing with. When you look straight on at them, you would think that that is a one-dimensional parrot on a canvas that he painted or drew. But then you go to the side of that drawing, that artwork, and it is three-dimensional, and it is layered with all different kinds of colored figures and trash and odd pieces of things on the inside. And that parrot is actually probably 12 inches away from the canvas. And it is really cool how this artist did that. But when you're looking straight at it, you don't see nothing but a parrot. But then when you get deeper onto the side of it, you see all the layers. And you think about how we look at God that way. We look at our situation of, oh, well, there's this parrot on a canvas. But maybe we need to take the time to go sideways and look at it and see, oh, but God's in the middle of it and he's got it all figured out. Fear is not about what's out there. It's about what you've got in here. You're not losing at life. You're losing to the internal narrative that fear built. When you say, I'm not ready. I'm not qualified. I'll just mess it all up. So instead of even trying, let me just do nothing and back up. You know, we got on that conversation in our young adults group this week about how we can self-sabotage when we're afraid. And we'll purposefully, whether it's a conscious thought or unconscious thought, purposefully mess it up to prove that our fear is worth having. Because fear can be disguised as wisdom. When it's telling us, oh, you don't want to get involved, you'll just mess it up. Or you don't have the right words to say, so you just need to not be involved. Because fear is the lie that sounds like you. Number 2, write this down. Fear creates agreement with the wrong voice. Fear creates agreement with the wrong voice. In Matthew 14, Peter decided, step out on the water with Jesus. He stepped out, and in that moment, that initial step, he had enough faith to cause him to jump out of that boat, right? He's like, Jesus is out on the water. The waves are going. I got this. But what happened? He didn't just get scared. He shifted what he agreed with. At first, he agreed with Jesus. Said, you've got this under control. I'm going to take a step out of faith, and I'm going to step out on the water. But then he saw the wind. He saw the waves. And he stopped agreeing with the voice of Jesus and started agreeing with the evidence of his environment. Take a second. How many times, or what's the first thought that pops into your head of where you've agreed with your environment? I had this weird, crazy dream last night, matter of fact. I was at this long table, and there was storm clouds rolling in. Crazy storm with one of those big, huge wall clouds that you know coming from behind it is going to be some tornadoes and some destruction. And so my younger 3 kids were sitting at this table with a whole bunch of people. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. And I'm like, get up from the table right now, and I want you to run. I was like, run into the Piggly Wiggly. I know it's random. Just one of them dreams. And I see Natalie running in front of me, way, way ahead. And I'm like, Natalie, slow down. And she turns around and looks at me. And she's like, I got this. I got this. And she keeps running straight ahead. And we get inside the Piggly Wiggly and we're hiding in the bathroom and she's missing. And that fear, I'm looking out the window, looking for my daughter that's missing, and I don't see her in this storm. It's like the Wizard of Oz movie where everything is floating around in the sky. And I'm looking at the circumstances. I'm like, I'm about to go out in this storm to track down my child that's missing and leave my 2 sons behind. And I run outside, and there's another little girl that looks like her. I scream her name at the top of my lungs, and she turns around, and it's not mine. And I'm like, hey, you need to get inside. And I go out looking and looking. And I'm looking around this environment scared for my child that's missing. And I get to the little wooden house and walk inside, and there she is sitting there saying, Mom, what are you afraid of? I'm good. Like nothing in the world is going on outside. And when I was reading back through my notes this morning, that dawned on me. How it related to this. I was in my dream looking at the environment. But my daughter was looking at, I got this. And it left me with the feeling of she wasn't scared because she knew she was going to be safe. She had it under control because of who she was on the inside. So how many times do we take the evidence of our environment over what we know deep down? I was telling someone this week of sometimes you got to remind yourself all of the times that God has showed up on your behalf. So that you don't take the evidence of your environment into account. Because you got to say, well, God showed up for me then, so he can do it, what? Again, right? If your bank account is low and you got to make a choice of whether you're going to pay your tithes or buy groceries for your family, and you say, you know what? Nope. God has showed up for me before, so he's going to show up for me again, and you get home and there's groceries sitting on your doorstep. Who showed up on your behalf? God did. So whatever voice you agree with, it becomes your reality. So faith said, if God said it, I can stand on it. Fear says, if I have seen it, then I have to submit to it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to submit to fear. Because fear is not just an emotion, it's a misplaced agreement. You're agreeing with worst case scenarios. You're agreeing with past failures. You're agreeing with imagined outcomes instead of agreeing with what the Word says. What God has promised you, what you hear deep on the inside of the voice that God's saying. You've not fallen because the storm got stronger. You've fallen because your agreement shifted. So don't be like Peter in that initial step out on the water. Keep your focus straight. Number 3, fear seeks to disconnect you from your identity and your authority. Fear is trying to disconnect you from your identity, strip you of your authority, and keep you from what God says is yours. Genesis 3:10 is where the first place fear appears in the garden. After Adam says, I was afraid, so I hid. Sin entered, fear followed, and then Adam and Eve hid from God. Remember, fear produces distance from God, silence instead of intimacy, and hiding instead of walking in authority. Fear will always push you to withdraw. It will always push you to hide. It will produce, that avoidance and want you to stay quiet. Because when you're hiding, when you're avoiding, you're not stepping into dominion. And when you're not stepping into dominion, you are not allowing God's glory to be shown to the world. Think about that. Think about the Israelites when David and Goliath were facing each other. The Israelites were hiding. Goliath was coming out for 40 days straight, taunting them. But once David said, fear is not going to keep the Israelites contained, because we have seen God move on our behalf when we crossed the Red Sea. We've seen God move when he fed us in the wilderness for 40 years. And David said, nope, not going to happen. He stepped out. And what did he do? He moved on God's behalf. And so then God's glory was displayed to all the nation. So when fear binds you, it keeps you hidden. You are not allowing the glory of God to shine. And what are we called to do? We're called to proclaim who God is. And if we're not proclaiming who God is, are we doing God a disservice? Absolutely. He wants to silence your voice, silence your obedience, silence your influence. Because a fearless believer is dangerous. When David stepped out on that battlefield, he became dangerous with just 5 stones. Number 4, write this down. Fear is sustained by lies, but broken by the truth of God. Remember, fear says if fear is a spirit, then it must be confronted spiritually. You have to choose to evict fear. Paul's not saying cope with fear. He's not saying understand fear. He says God did not give it. So if God didn't give it, then that means it's illegal in your life. So you need to arrest it and deject it. Arrest it and deject it. I know in my own life, when I have battled fear, then I will do exactly what I'm afraid of. I'll tell you this little story. About 5 years ago, I was in Wetumpka at a fundraising event for special needs. It was a special needs sporting event for all of Elmore County schools. And I was there representing the company that I was working for because we had sponsored the event. And there were several of us standing around, and the Wetumpka Fire Department had one of the huge ladder trucks out there, and they had the ladder all the way extended with an American flag hanging from the end. And I'm looking at it, and so they were talking about, climbing the ladder. What would it be like, And somehow I got dared to climb all the way the ladder and touch the American flag hanging at the end. Now, my pride would not let me turn that dare down. You're not going to call me weak. But on the inside, I was shaking like a leaf. Literally. And so the fire department guys were standing there, and they're like, you want to do it? I'm like, well, I can't not do the dare. He's like, come on. And I get over to the fire truck, and I say, all right, you going to, tether me on or anything like that? And he's like, no, just climb up. I was like, that's it? Just climb up? He's like, yeah, climb up. And I'm shaking like a leaf. But I'm like, all right, I'm not going to lose this, but I'm not going to let fear get the best of me. And the wind was blowing, and so the ladder was kind of shaking, and I did. I climbed all the way up, touched the American flag at the end. There's a video of it somewhere. And then climbed all the way back down. And that's just one example. But if something I know, like something I'm afraid of, I'm going to do exactly what I'm afraid of because I'm going to kick fear in the face and say, no, you're not going to get me. If I'm at the store and the Lord leads me to go talk to somebody and I'm like, God, I don't know them. And fear tries to say, oh, yeah, they might look at you and laugh. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk over and go talk to them because fear is not going to say, ha, I got you. Kind of that holy pride of saying, nuh-uh, my God is greater than anything that you can try to get me with. So what in your life right now are you afraid of that God's saying, hey, just take a step out? Fear builds through loops over and over again. Mental strongholds, imaginary outcomes. But 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, casting down imaginations. Fear lives within the what ifs. What about? What happens when? Fear is faith in the wrong outcome. Fear is faith in the wrong direction. So fear is like, if you're believing in fear, then you're saying, God, what you have and what you have for me is not good enough. I'm going to stay on the side of fear. Faith believes what God said. Fear believes what hasn't happened yet. So I want you guys to repeat after me. Fear is faith in the wrong direction. Faith believes what God said. Fear believes what hasn't happened. So what has happened in your life? You're here, right? You woke up this morning, right? You're breathing, right? You got your way here to church this morning, right? You got a roof over your head, right? Those are the things that have happened. So why are you rehearsing failure more than you've been declaring the truth? Why are you rehearsing failure more than you're declaring truth? There's this statement, Pastor Mitchell used to say it a lot, and I looked it up this morning again to add it in here. It says, don't nurse it. Don't give emotional thoughts fuel. Or don't give a negative thoughts emotional fuel. Don't rehearse it. Stop replaying it over and over again. Don't curse it. Resist reacting with rage or negative words. And if you can do those things, then God has to reverse it for you. Romans 10:17 says, faith comes by hearing. So that means what you repeatedly hear, you will eventually believe. But how long are you going to take to truly embrace it, to believe it? What you believe, you will eventually live. 1 John 4:18 says, perfect love casts out fear. Not information, but the revelation of God's love. God is for you. God is with you. God is not abandoning you. And when you embrace those things, fear loses the oxygen in its lungs. Like a fire. You're lighting a candle, and you want that candle to keep on burning. You leave it open, right? So it can gather oxygen around it. But if you want to snuff it out, put a lid on it, and it has nothing to cause it to grow. That's how we have to treat fear. Have a lid of God is for me. A lid that is God is with me. A lid that says God will never abandon me. So let me tell you how to have daily warfare against fear. Fear that is overcomable. You can't be a passive Christian. You have to have intentional resistance. You have to fight fear by, number one, identifying the lie. Identifying what lie you're believing. Number two, replace it with the truth. So if you identify the lie, then identify the truth. Number three, speak that truth out loud. So if you have to walk around all day long that says, God has not given me a spirit of fear, and I'm going to overcome whatever sickness I'm facing, then that's what you got to do. If you have to walk around saying, nope, God's got this over and over again, what did we say? Whatever we repeat, whatever we hear ourselves say, we will eventually believe. And then you got to act in faith anyway. You got to do what you're afraid of doing. So ask yourself, what lie have I agreed with? What has fear made me shrink? What has fear stolen from my obedience? Then confront it with scripture, with declaration, with action. The praise team comes. Fear is not your master. You guys would stand. Fear may visit, but it cannot stay. Fear may speak, but fear does not have authority. Fear may try, but it cannot win. So I want to lead you guys in a little prayer this morning to denounce fear. I want you to pray this over your own life. Just say after me, I renounce fear.
I renounce fear.
I break agreement with every lie.
Break agreement with every lie.
Fear is not from God.
Fear is not from God.
I refuse to partner with it.
I refuse to partner with it.
I receive love.
I receive love.
I receive power.
I receive power.
And I receive a sound mind. Fear does not own me anymore. Say that one more time. Fear, you do not own me anymore. In the name of Jesus. Father, in the name of Jesus, we break every assignment of fear. We tear down every stronghold of the mind. Lord, right now we declare that every voice that has lied to us is completely silent. Lord, if you bound up the mouths of the lions in the lion's den with Daniel, we declare right now that the voices of fear are tied up and shut. Every false narrative is canceled right now. You're restoring identity, restoring boldness, restoring clarity, and you're awakening a new faith like we've never known in our life. Break up the ground of all my traditions. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition. Break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. I will make room for you. Do whatever you